Welcome to Thrive Deeper, an ongoing conversation with Dr. Matthew Jacoby, author of the Thrive Bible Reading Guides, teaching pastor, and leader of the Psalmist band Sons of Korah. Join us as we go deeper into the Bible, discussing the passages as we read them together with Thrive. Now here's your host, DJ Payne.
G'day and welcome to episode 27 of Thrive Deeper. DJ here and excited to bring you this conversation between Matthew Jacoby and myself. Now, in this week's episode, we head headlong into the book of Esther. What makes this Old Testament book of Esther so unique? We're going to look at a bit of the overview, get started in the story in this episode, and carry it on into next week's episode as well. Really hope you enjoy our discussion in the book of Esther. I took away new insights as I read through in preparation for this, so I'm excited to bring this one to you. Now, as we get started in this week's episode, Matthew and I are sitting down and we are surrounded by Christmas decorations in the studio. So we were talking about what we really think about Christmas and where we sit with it all. So enjoy that, and I'll be at the other end of the discussion to wrap up this week's episode. Enjoy this week's discussion. So as we're recording this, Matt, we're heading headlong into Christmas season.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. How now? I'm
a bit grinchy.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I'm a bit grinchy. I love what it means, but I'm a bit over Christmas carols. Just a little bit grinchy.
When you say you're a little bit over Christmas,
warning you.
Yeah. When you say you're a little bit over Christmas carols, we're recording this on the 7th of December, right? So we haven't even gotten close. Are you saying at this particular season or in life in general?
I love the hymns. Look, the Christmas hymns, they're beautiful, and it's the jingle bells, and it's honestly, it's like serious. Maybe it's a personal thing. It's because it reminds me that I'm getting older. It's like, seriously, wasn't this just last month that we had Christmas?
Yeah, exactly. Anyway. It goes by very, very quickly. Now, do you have any Christmas traditions in the household, in the Jacoby household?
Well, the German side of my family celebrates Christmas on Christmas Eve.
Of course.
We do a big Christmas Eve dinner.
Yep.
And the British side is, of course, Christmas Day, along with everyone else here.
So you get double bonus.
Double bonus, except normally when I'm with my dad, that's when we do the Christmas Eve thing. So just Christmas Day this year.
So not
just
with your
the
dad.
One Christmas.
Oh, you poor thing. No Christmas vacations?
No, not this year. We're hanging around.
Have you got a full preaching schedule at the church over Christmas and summer?
Well, I'm speaking on Christmas Day at One Hope Baptist Church, as it's now called.
Yeah.
And then I have a bit of a break in January, so that'll be good. I try to take a break around this time of year.
Yeah.
I get a little bit tired of the sound of my own voice. I often say that I always feel like there's something wrong if I'm talking about God more than I'm talking to God.
Yeah.
and I don't think that's been the case, but it can easily become the case.
Very much so.
And I do a lot of talking, and it's nice just to take a break. As much as I love it.
Do you get? I'm a little bit with you with the Grinch side of Christmas, if I can be totally honest, right? So much so that I have two of the people can't believe this. I had a lady, a dear American friend, this week. Literally, I thought she was going to have a heart attack or report me to the police or the authorities. Two of my three children, one of them who's just about to turn 15, the other one who is 12, are both spending Christmas and New Year's away from the family this year. One in South Africa, one in Queensland away.
Wow.
And so there's only myself, my wife, and our youngest going to be together for Christmas and New Year's.
Wow.
I'm looking forward to it because it's, even smaller, but she just couldn't believe that you wouldn't have everybody together over Christmas, so that, that tradition. But yeah, I'm a little bit like you. I'm happy to, keep it low key.
It can be very painful for people because often it brings up family things. And, I used to work way back in the mid-90s. I used to work at Bowen Prison as a music teacher. And it was a really painful day for the inmates of the prison. And I said, so do you miss I said to one of the guys, so do you miss catching up with the? He said, no, it was worse when I was out, because it just brought,
The
a lot of
family
conflict
brawls,
and a lot, so it actually, for a lot of people, I think it's always worth remembering that, I know for a lot of us it's happy families, but it's not that way for a lot of people, and need to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
But that's of course, Christmas is a great time to get together with family and friends, and it's great.
Well, the great news is that our schedule of podcasting over the for us in Australia, the summer period, we're not slowing down. No rest for the wicked for us.
Oh, so I don't get rest.
No, you don't get no rest for this for our
Okay.
voices here. We're going to continue going straight through, because of course what we're trying to do with this podcast is not so much make it tied to the season and the day when we're recording it. We want this to be longevity, that'll last there. So
and it is, and I mean the Thrive we do. There's a Thrive, like we do mark the season to some extent with Thrive.
Yeah.
We Thrive doesn't follow the ecclesiastical calendar or the
evangelical type of tradition.
It's not so much evangelical, but more the traditional church.
Oh, like the Orthodox type of calendars and stuff.
Well, even like Anglican churches and Lutheran churches, more traditional churches follow a liturgical calendar, where they have Advent and we have Easter and Christmas, but others have, like Pentecost and the various festivals, Christian festivals that have traditionally been observed. Now we don't follow that with the Thrive thing. Mainly because it would just take over, because you've got the whole year. And Thrive is really meant to be oriented around reading through the Bible. But we do, it's Christmas and Easter are both great times to celebrate key aspects of our of our beliefs, and to actually connect with people around those things, because everyone's celebrating this time.
Yeah.
So it's a great time to talk about Jesus.
Yeah.
Christmas time. Great time to talk about Jesus.
A great time to become
and to celebrate that.
Yeah, and to be an evangelist, to say, this is the reason for the season. I know
That's
how corny that is, but it's totally true. Well, I'm glad you brought up the the idea of festivals and holy days and things like this, because we're about to go into a very interesting book of the Bible, which is the basis of a very important Jewish festival.
That's right. That was a really good segue.
Hey, I'm a professional.
Master of
thank you.
It is. It's the book of Esther is the festival. The festival that's connected with that is the festival of Purim. Which is a big thing.
Yeah.
The festival of Purim is a big thing in the Jewish community, and over in Israel. I was in Israel during the festival of Purim.
Oh wow!
And it's sort of their version of Halloween. Now it's not obviously it's got no connection in terms of the content, but in the way that it's celebrated, like everyone dressing up.
Yeah.
Like they have an almighty big party. People get dressed up. They have big festivals.
Is it a particular time of the year every year?
Yeah, it's around sort of early March.
Okay.
It's around that time of year. I think it seems to move a bit.
As a lot of the Jewish holidays do actually move. It's not on the same day every year type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was over there during that time, and like in Tel Aviv, like people just walking around everywhere, just in dress up. It was just the most classic,
awesome,
a real classic time, and so it's a big celebration in Israel and for Jewish people
which is unusual for us in the Christian tradition, because we get to the Book of Esther and we sort of go, yep, okay, moving right along, because we don't really take a lot of spiritual lessons out of it. Traditionally, Christians have gone, oh, gee, there's no mention of God in this book. And,
well, that's right. I mean, that's one of the big things. There isn't actually, God isn't explicitly mentioned in the book of Esther.
Yeah.
And so it's curious in that sense, but really only in that sense, because in every other sense, the themes of the book of Ezra are extremely biblical.
Esther.
Yeah. What did I say?
Ezra.
Oh, sorry, Esther.
Well, we're in the no. Well, okay, that's another great segue, because this past week of our readings, for one day, we went back into the book of Ezra. You know, so we're sort of giving Esther the context of the overall story of. So let's paint that bigger picture again. We have been talking about the story of the exiles, the Jewish exiles coming out of Babylonia, out of the Persian Empire, and under different leaders going back to Jerusalem to reestablish the Jewish nation.
Yeah, that's right. So that happens in the proclamation of Cyrus to release the Jewish people and let them go home is in 537. They are, working on the temple around 535 back in Jerusalem. The temple is completed. Now, Ezra's not there on the scene yet.
Yes.
This is under Zerubbabel and Joshua the priest, and we've talked a little bit about that.
And we've heard from Haggai and Zechariah
during that time, right? So when they see the temple through to completion, and that's in 515. Now, this is why we jump now over to back into Persia.
Yeah.
So this is actually east. The city of Susa, where the story of Esther is set, is actually it's the capital of the Persian Empire. Because remember, the Persians defeated the Babylonians.
Yes.
But the capital of Persia remains in Susa, which is east of Babylonia in modern day Iran. I believe.
I think so.
Okay.
Now, what we're talking.
And this is 483.
Okay,
so 515.
Yes,
we're going backwards. Remember.
Yeah.
And then 483 is when the events begin in the story of Esther.
Okay, so we're talking about, from the time that Daniel was taken in, like the main exiles were taken in after Daniel and everything like that. 100 and something years after that.
Yes, it's
like
it is
110, 120 years.
So the last lot of exiles actually went into exile around. There was a smaller contingent, like a fourth deportation that was around 583 actually.
Yeah.
The main deportation was in 586.
Okay.
So this is 100 years after that.
Yeah. So 100 years after that, when you think of 100 years, you think, okay, there's generations of Jewish people born into this civilization.
Absolutely.
We've been following this.
Point.
We've been following the story of those Jews who've gone back to the homeland, and now we sort of go. Meanwhile, back in Persia.
That's right, back in Persia, and this is the interesting thing that we find out from this book, and I actually noted it from reading this time, is that one of the things that's said in the book of Esther about the Jewish people in general throughout the empire is that they are completely different to anyone else and they observe distinct customs. So that's a really important point. Yeah. Because, of course, the problem before the exile was that they just kept trying to be like everyone else, right? And so the exile, it really, they at least a remnant. I mean, the statement that's made by Haman in the story, we'll talk about him a little later. I mean, it could be a general statement about, because they're the ones, of course, that you would notice.
Yes.
But there certainly is a big community, not only those who end up coming back to Jerusalem, but even amongst the community that remain there, who are very committed, actually, to their Jewish faith, committed enough to be completely distinct to anyone else. So the 40-odd thousand that came back to Jerusalem from 537 right through to Ezra's time and afterwards, they're not the only kind of real law-observing Jews. There's plenty back in exile, and we meet them in this story. And the whole point of when I say that the story of Esther is thoroughly biblical, it's basically a story that shows that God is faithful to his everlasting covenant with the covenant people. Yeah. That's because it's in the story of Esther that the greatest recorded threat in the whole Bible, the greatest recorded threat to God's covenant people, Israel or the Jewish people, happens right here. Wow. Like complete annihilation throughout the Persian Empire. This is the threat that comes up in this book, right? This is the story that there was this decree that goes out to completely exterminate all of the Jewish people throughout the Persian Empire. Now, the Persian Empire is everywhere, basically. That's everywhere. Yeah. So this is salvation from complete genocide. And when we think of, it's hard for us to think as modern, people living in our era of an empire that covers the whole world. Practically the whole world, because we think of a big country like the USA, or Great Britain, that type of thing. We've got these countries, or China or Russia. No, Persia was ruling the known world. Yeah, I mean, they went right to the border of India in the east. Yeah. In the west, they didn't go as far as Rome. They annexed at least most of Greece, so Thrace, and if you picturing a map of ancient history, which of course you are right now.
Of course. Yeah, we know it well.
So they annexed, like Greece right through. If you imagine Greece right through to the border of India. I mean, that's a massive. Oh, and Egypt in the south.
Yeah.
And because remember, there were lots of Jews in Egypt, and this decree went out through all of this territory.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a big deal.
This is a big deal.
A big deal. Esther. Okay, so let's take a bit of an overview. Okay, so we've seen it in the historical transition there. We went back to Jerusalem, saw what was happening in Jerusalem. There's a whole nother a set of events about to get started in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
With the fortifying everything there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're heading back into Persia to see what's happening there. Authorship of the book. This is an unusual one because it doesn't say, now, I am so-and-so and I'm writing this book. It just begins.
Well, a lot of the historical books don't do that. I mean, we don't necessarily know with Kings. We think that Ezra and Nehemiah is written by Ezra.
Yes.
Now, it's quite possible that the book of Esther was written by Mordecai, who's one of the main characters. And again, we'll go through the story and we'll discuss this. But Mordecai is this one of the two main characters, Esther and Mordecai. So, who is Esther's relative? So, and who sort of adopts Esther.
Yeah.
So maybe it probably was written by Mordecai.
Yeah, or at least taken from the notes that he, he basically his diary. So we've got it there, and looking at it historically, looking at some of the notes about the historical acceptance of the book, it was never in real contention with Jewish people, as far as this is part of our, our holy works, this is part of our scrolls, that we read from. But the early church, for the first couple of 100 years, were a little bit like, oh, don't know about this one.
That's right.
Don't know about that one.
Yeah. And look, authorship could well be later, as you say. I mean, I think probably, a lot of scholars suggest that the authorship is later and that it was sort of backfilling the festival of Purim. But there seemed to be, I did a bit of a survey. There seems to be, consensus, like there seems to be a lot of optimism about the historicity about the story. I mean, there are critical scholars who would say, "Oh no, it's just a nice story."
Yeah.
But they always say that. Putting aside a, starting with doubt way of approaching the Bible, which I think is problematic. If we come, then I think it's certainly probably authored soon after this time, perhaps a little later.
Yeah.
And yes, the early church did have a bit of a problem with it, and a bit around this idea of it. Well, this is a nice story, but where is God in this story?
Yeah.
It is unusual, actually, in that you would have a book that wouldn't mention God. I mean, this is. Let's face it. I kind of get that. That's unusual.
Well, there's only two books really that do not mention God in the Bible: Song of Solomon, and Esther.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I read one note, and you can probably fill me in, Matt, if you're across it with your scholarly work. Is that the early versions of some of the Greek translations, when the church went, okay, we'll let it in. Some of the Greek translations went, okay, but slip more God in it. And some of the later manuscripts have got, and so God did this, and God, and they've put it in. But the earliest, the Jewish, copies of no, there's no. What are you mentioning God in it for?
Yeah, that's right. So, and it's not. Look, it is. Apart from that element, I mean, it really fits in so well with the themes of Scripture because what happens here is so consistent with the nature of the covenant fulfillment. I mean, all of the narratives in the Old Testament are all about how God is faithful to His covenant with His people, and this is what this story is all about. I mean, it's another instance of a narrative that is essentially addressing God's faithfulness. So it's strong. I mean, even saying it's strongly implied is too weak.
Yeah.
I think God is there in this. It's just not mentioned explicitly.
Okay, so let's we mentioned the cast of characters that we're going to be talking about. Of course, there's the person of Esther.
Yeah.
And Esther being like Daniel.
Yeah.
Esther being probably the renamed name of
that's right, Ishtar, because both Mordecai and Esther have Babylonian names.
Yes.
Actually, Mordecai after Marduk, the
Yes.
god Marduk.
Yeah.
And Esther. Well, I mean, the Ishtar was quite, or Ashtoreth. I mean, this is
Yeah.
the female goddess
Yes.
that is very popular in the ancient Near East. So she's actually named after this. I mean, it's interesting that these very Jewish people have these very pagan names.
Yeah, and they've become over history.
But that was quite common.
Over history, the paganness of the original of the names
that's
doesn't
right.
matter.
It's
And
been
now
lost, yeah.
we think of two of the most Jewish names that we can think of, Mordecai and Esther.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So we've got Mordecai and Esther. They're relatives, uncle, cousin, maybe
yeah,
type of
yeah.
thing. She's an orphan, been adopted by her relative.
Yeah.
Mordecai is raising her there.
Yeah.
And then we also have the king of Persia.
Yes. So
Now there's-
just before we get on to him.
Okay, yep.
So Mordecai, his father went into exile with the exiles. So he's
First generation
in exile. Now he is, interestingly, he is a descendant of Kish. He goes through Shimei and Kish.
Yes.
So he's a descendant of Saul.
Wow.
Okay.
I didn't pick up on
Mordecai
that.
is
Yeah.
a descendant of Saul, of King Saul.
Wow.
Okay, so he's a Benjamite, descendant of Saul. Now, we just shelve that for a little later.
Okay.
If we can just put a
Little asterisk there, little pin up on the board there. Okay.
Speaking of Ishtar. Okay. Anyway, and yes, and then we have Xerxes. Now, have you seen? Okay, Xerxes
I know
the second.
exactly where you're going to go. I know exactly where you're going to go.
Have you seen 300?
Yes.
The movie, right?
The movie 300.
Okay, the king that's on the big stage that gets dragged along with all the chains hanging.
Yeah.
Right, that's Esther's husband. That's Xerxes here.
So we are now in that period where the Greeks are beginning to rise up.
So
in
this is the period of Thermopylae and all of those. The period of when 300.
Do it for Sparta. All of that is
all
around.
of that stuff, right,
is
okay.
around this era. Now you're doing what most I think most scholars these days are saying. This is the Persian king Xerxes in here because over the years there's been arguments for different Persian kings it could have been in which era.
Yeah, well, there's not. I mean, it's fairly solid. Now, it's solid enough for a lot of English translations now to translate what in Hebrew is Ahasuerus.
Yes.
So in the Hebrew, the king is named as Ahasuerus. Now, I mean, there are reasons for what. I mean, there are often dual names.
Yes.
We see that in a lot of cases where kings are called this rather than this because they have different titles. Yeah. But there seems to be little doubt that this is Xerxes. So
which is an historically,
he is. We know
him,
quite a bit about Xerxes, and of course, as I've said, he's the one that's fighting against the Greeks at Thermopylae as well.
Yeah. And in this story, he's pretty much a caricature of a over the top, always got a drink in his hand. Rich, ruling king. Yeah,
he was excessively wealthy.
Yeah,
excessively wealthy.
Beyond what we could imagine.
Yeah,
like take what you think of the most wealthiest, billionaire in Dubai.
Yeah,
doesn't even scratch the surface.
That's right. Yeah, there's a story that goes on during, and Herodotus narrates this incident that occurred during Xerxes' retreat from Greece. In one of these battles, when the king left his tent in one of the abandoned camps, and the Greeks, found the tent full of silver and gold couches and all of this wealth, and they asked themselves, why would this rich Persian want to conquer these impoverished Greeks, right? What can we possibly answer? So that's something that's recorded in Herodotus. So he is excessively wealthy.
So do you think the 300? The 300 movie. A bit warning: we're not recommending the 300 movie. Well,
it's the story behind it is an amazing story. The story of the Spartans. I referred to them as Greeks before, but they kind of are. They are, but they're a very distinct group. The Spartans. It is the story of the 300 Spartans is an amazing story. Yeah,
it's over the top. It's rated, I don't know, whatever, M for a reason. It's pretty over the top of the film.
I think,
so we're not recommending for it's not a family type film, but the portrayal of Xerxes the king. in that movie is breathtaking. You know, like you literally, when he enters in the screen for the first time, you're gobsmacked that a human being, like he seems like a god.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, type of thing. Do you like that portrayal?
I liked it. Yeah. Actually, because I knew of Xerxes, and I thought, I wonder how they're going to. I mean, I sort of saw the shorts, and I thought, I don't know, that's not how. It's certainly not how a Persian king would have looked.
Yes,
they would have had the beard, and I mean, and so they've portrayed him a little oddly there, but he in terms of his. The godlike portrayal. See, they were hailed as being like gods, and so it's very consistent. So I like that about it, that sort of characterization, and also the fact that he was enormously wealthy and enormously powerful, and I think that comes through. As well in 300.
One more character we've got to hear for this story, and there's got to be. And you thought that Xerxes or the king of Persia might be the bad guy, but no, he's just the king of Persia. He's the power of the bees. Yeah. There's one more character, and you've got to have, for a really good story, you've got to have a really good villain.
Yep, that's right.
And we get a great villain here.
Yeah.
We get Haman.
We get Haman.
Yeah.
So he's an especially good villain, and I'll tell you why he's an especially good villain. He is called Haman the Agagite.
Yeah. Not Haman the Persian. Not Haman the Babylonian.
Right.
Like the Agagite. Where is this from?
Agagite. So let me ask you a question. Do you remember an Agag from anywhere?
Yes.
Tell me about Agag.
Agag goes back right to the beginning of the Jewish, the Jewish nation. Yeah.
Yes. Let's. This is a guessing game. Remember, I mentioned that Mordecai is a descendant of King Saul.
Yes.
Okay. Now Saul has some dealings with Agag, the king of the Amalekites.
Yes, which is part of the Canaanite family of people. Yeah, have I got that wrong?
That's right. Yeah. So the Amalekites are part of these, this people, and then this is very significant for this story because it's easy to miss this.
Yes.
And this is why I say he's an especially good villain, right? Yeah. Because he is descended from Agag, according to the narrative, descended from Agag, who's an Amalekite. Now, the Amalekites were really the number one. I mean, we often think of the Philistines as the arch enemies of Israel, but the Amalekites particularly so because they had a particular curse put upon them because of their constant opposition to Israel. So remember, and it's in, if I recall correctly, Exodus 17, when Israel are walking through the desert and they're attacked. Remember Moses lifts his hands during the battle?
And they're fighting the Amalekites.
And it's the Amalekites that they're fighting, right?
Wow.
They have trouble later again with the Amalekites while they're wandering in the desert.
Yeah. They wouldn't let them in.
They wouldn't let them through. Yeah. They're just constant. And at one point, so at one point there is this, God puts this curse on the Amalekites and says that their name will be blotted out from the earth, right?
Wow.
And this is the big issue when Saul fights against the Amalekites and he brings Agag back along with the sheep and the cattle.
Yes,
and Samuel confronts him and says, "What is this bleating of sheep? Yeah. Like you were meant to utterly destroy this people and not even bring any plunder, not even win any plunder from this. Just destroy everything."
And it's that heartbreaking scene of Saul grabbing hold.
Yeah, that's right. Because he should not have left the Agagite, the Amalekite king Agag, alive.
And that's when God has said, "I'm done with you, Saul."
Yeah, that's when God says, "I'm done with you, Saul." Right. Yeah. So now here is Mordecai, right, who's a descendant of Saul. Okay,
I love it.
He's a descendant of Saul. And he is going to be instrumental in the destruction of Haman, who's a descendant of Agag. I mean, this is amazing stuff.
I love it.
This is great. And this is classic. This just happens again and again in the Bible. This is the brilliance of this. All these strands connect up and reconnect at points, and it's like never ignore the details. Yeah. Don't ever ignore the details.
Wow. Oh, that's good. That's good. I sort of I feel bad because I skimmed. I went Agag. Okay, Saul. Yes, and I sort of skimmed over.
Right,
I didn't get into the rest of it there. Okay, that's great. Now, we've mentioned the fact before we get into the crux of the story here, in the first, we'll set up the first couple of chapters here, and then we'll continue it on in next week's episode. But one of the things, and we don't want to bang on it too much about it, but the fact that it is one of the two books of the Bible that does not explicitly say the Lord did this, God did this, and there's been different interpretations why, and I liked one particular interpretation that says it's sort of taking the biblical narrative to the next level, where it's saying to the reader, okay, this is phase 2 of your lessons.
Yeah.
You find God. We're not gonna say God did this. You've got to look into the story and say, okay, where is God in the story?
Yeah.
And there's something about that I really particularly loved, because it is full of coincidences.
Yeah.
It is full of ironies. It's full of those moments like you've just laid out with, the descendants here. And it doesn't say that God set it all up. It's now expecting you to look through it in a worldview and go, well, of course it's God.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So, and I think it does that. I think it draws you in. You think, I know what's going on here. Like, for Jewish readers, this is like all of the tension in the story is, here is this decree against the Jewish people. And straight away, an original Jewish reader would have said, wait a second, what about the everlasting covenant? What about God's eternal plan for his people? They can't be wiped out. I mean, it says in the Genesis 12 covenant, God says, I will bless you, make you into a great nation, and through you all the ends of the earth will be blessed. Yeah. Not only that, but it says, I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you, I will curse. So there's this expectation, well, the people now are being threatened with death. They've been cursed. Right, okay. This is about now when God steps in. This is the kind of tension that's built up in this book, and the way that happens is in classic biblical fashion, where it's this idea of judgment recalling upon those who mete out judgment. So Psalm 35, for example, says, they dug a pit for me, but they have fallen into it themselves.
Yes.
It's this idea, or they spread a net for me, but they've been caught in it themselves. They were snared by the very evil that they poured out on me. This is this reflexive thing.
And this book, Esther, is pretty much a mirror image. Yeah. What this man has decided to use for evil, it's going to be meted out to him. I'm going to use the exact, it's explicitly laid out. Yeah, that's right.
Book. So in the end, Haman is impaled on the pole that he lifted up for Mordecai. It happens in exactly the way that it's stated again and again and again. And often in those cases, it's stated metaphorically. Yes. This idea, they dug a pit for me, but they've fallen into it themselves. Yes. That's a metaphor in a lot of places it happens. But actually here it happens literally. It's like he lifted up a pole for me to be impaled on, and he has been impaled on it himself. Yeah. Yeah. Now, impaling, of course, it's a very unfortunate thing to have to mention.
Well, here's the other sort of interesting thing about this book, is that even though we've got good guys and bad guys, and we've got this weird king, the good guys sometimes aren't exactly that good.
Well,
there's a lot of violence and bloodshed in this.
Yeah, there's a lot of violence. I mean, perhaps when we go through the story, we can cover that.
Well, I'm just going to, we'll leave that there. We don't have to justify anything yet, but as we get through the story, there's going to be some moments.
Well, there's certainly lots of violence, but that's, this is
a violent people.
Yeah,
a violent time.
It actually is a defensive. Because the decree went out to kill it, and there's the famous thing of the laws of the Medes and the Persians. Yeah. I mean, we even have that saying. It's not the law of the Medes and the Persians. Yes. The law of the Medes and the Persians mean when a decree is made, it can't be rescinded. Yes. So there had to be another decree allowing the Jews to defend themselves. Yeah. That's how the issue was solved in the end. Okay. Hence, the violence is defensive. So people because. Another important contextual thing around this time is that it's evident that there's a high degree of anti-Semitism during this period. Yes. So when the decrees go out in the book of Esther, hey, kill all the Jewish people. Great. You know what I mean? Because they have, because they became quite wealthy. They ascended to positions of great prominence in the empire. Yep. I mean, we see this in the book of Daniel, don't we? Yes. Daniel gets blessed, and they're always trying to kill him off. They're trying to kill off these Jewish people, and we see that even there in Daniel, right? So
Daniel's like the setting of this type of theme, and Esther's like, okay, we're going to now dial up to 100, where it's not just one man that the enemy wants to take down; it's the entire
whole people, right? Yeah, that's right. So
and it's almost like being able to see the spiritual side of things, where Satan goes, "I'm going to attack this one godly man," and then at this point he goes, no, you know what? I need to get rid of the entire Jewish people.
Yeah, that's right.
Throughout here.
Yeah.
And
So that's really what happens there. So there's this prevalent anti-Semitism, and the decree goes out saying kill and destroy all the Jewish people, and plenty of people think, oh great, this is our chance to bring all these people down. And so there is a lot of fighting and death, but it is fundamentally defensive.
Isn't it? And it's, I mean, just side note here, Esther is such an amazing pattern on sadly the wheel of history that has been repeating up until this very day, where the Jewish people are marked for destruction by different civilizations.
Yeah, by different civilizations. That's important. Yeah, I mean, it is. It is a really tragic fact of history.
Yeah.
And we see this here, and so there's a real poignancy actually to this. We were talking about Purim before. There's a real poignancy to Purim, particularly in the wake of the 20th century and the anti-Semitism of the early 20th century. I felt that when I was in Tel Aviv, and just the joy and the celebration around that festival, and combined with them having their space there. In the land of Israel, and it just seemed extra poignant given the last 100 years, but even the last 2,000 years, and in fact the last 4,000 years.
Exactly, we go right back to the very beginning. And again, one more small point, especially in some of the things that I've been reading up as we're getting ready for this week. I think it's important to remember that the church hasn't replaced Israel in God's design.
No, God has a
and the people and the Jewish people are still, the apple of God's. He still has a plan.
Yeah,
he's not finished with them yet
because because he made an everlasting covenant.
That's it.
With him. Now, look, there are some people who would advocate the idea that the church has replaced Israel.
What is that form of theology?
It's called replacement theology. Yeah. I think that's difficult. I feel like I feel like Paul is fairly clear in Romans 9-11 that because his heart goes out to his people, and he's not just saying, oh well, that's all finished now.
Yeah,
that there's no such thing as a Jewish people, and it's all about the church now.
And the book of Revelation is pretty hard to interpret if you take out that whole concept.
Yeah. So I think that's. Like I get that it's theologically neat. It's a theologically neat idea, but it's not. I can't see how that could be the case.
Yeah, I mean that whole principle of that the church is comes under the umbrella or is grafted in or is part of it. Great, but we don't replace. We don't supersede.
That's right. Yeah. Now, I mean, when we speak of that, too, I think it's important to. It's in terms of God's covenant people, the ethnic Jewish people, because. What exactly that looks like, its political manifest. I think we've got to be just a little cautious about just saying, therefore we need to unconditionally support the state of Israel. I mean, look, and I know lots of people I feel very passionate about that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's a slightly that's another step again.
Yes,
and that may well be a good thing, but. I just think there's caution to be had there.
Well, we've got an entire, most of our Bible recording the Jewish people's great decisions and not so great decisions when it comes to their, their ruling. That's right. And we see that today as well. Right. Yeah. There's some stuff that the Jewish, the state of Israel does that we go, bravo, that is fantastic. Yeah. And then there's other decisions you go, oh my goodness, what are they doing? So I think like you say, we can be open-eyed about it and realize.
And there are even differences of opinion amongst religious Jews about the status
Yes.
of all of these political things. I mean, there's no, and so I think its current political manifestation. I mean, I think God's been doing some amazing things.
Amen.
And I think in many ways, prophecy has been fulfilled, and I agree with all of those things. I just think it's important not to take a naive approach to this issue. And
all right.
Good.
Now let's go back in our time machine back to Esther. Exactly. Let's go back again. We're talking all about that is a massive. And again, we're saying all of that to say, remember, this is the story about God dealing with the Jewish people, and He's doing it. He's showing us a really specific moment with the cast of characters we got. Okay, so the scene, the book opens in this amazingly over-the-top, ostentatious scene of the King of Persia, not just throwing a little bit of a shindig. He has now been partying for a long time, and, the wine is flowing, the drink is flowing, and he's got all of his friends around him.
180 days is a long time, isn't it? I mean, it's like school this week, but for 180 days,
Exactly. Permanent school, it's crazy.
That's what you sort of imagine in you. I don't think it doesn't necessarily mean the banquet went for that long, but it's seems to be some sort of public sort of exposition that lasts for about a year, that lasts for this time. And he's really showing off his wealth and his power. And part of that, of course, is his queen is like the crown jewel of all of his wealth and power. It's the queen who sort of also is kind of the chosen woman out of his harem. I mean, the kings in those days had large harems.
Yes.
It was a kind of sign of your power and wealth.
Yes.
And so the queen is like really your crown jewel. So he's having this party and he's showing off all of his wealth, and he's, all of his mates there, and he says, and he's drunk, and, he get my wife out here. He wants to get her out to, do a bit of a dance and show off how beautiful she is. And she's just thinking, get out of here. I'm not. And the queen, actually, the queen's has quite a bit of power as well. But this seems to have gone to her head, and she thinks, because she's got having her little party at the same time.
Yes.
Now this wasn't because they were segregated, because in those times they certainly got together and did these sorts of things. But she's having her own little do off to the side with all her friends. So this is a bit of a battle of the prides.
Yes.
It's a classic situation, and so she refuses to come.
Yeah, Queen Vashti.
Queen Vashti.
Yeah, she's like,
and it's a absolute, it's a shame to the king. I mean, it's a spectacle. The whole thing.
In reading it in the light of news of whether it's feminist arguments or men's rights activists, this is absolutely hilarious. Yeah. That this problem goes back 2,500 years ago, where the King of Persia then decides, get the guys together. We are making a new decree. Yeah. All men, masters.
Yeah.
Of their domain, the masters of their home, we are the heads, our word goes. It's absolutely hilarious.
It's a classic situation. So he gets rid of her.
Yes.
And so he's got to find a new queen. And so he from all around the empire, the beautiful young women are brought into the harem of the king. Yeah. And he checks them all out, and the less said about that, the better.
Yes.
And he's to choose his queen, and this is where we meet Esther, because Esther is one of these beautiful young women, and she finds particular favour with the king, and she's chosen to be the new queen. Now she withholds what her nationality. Yeah. This is in fact, Mordecai tells her, don't mention that you're a Jew. Yeah. Possibly because of the anti-Semitism, because he thinks that's going to be held against her, and maybe it would be. So she's made queen,
and she's made queen because they make a big point that she is just the most beautiful thing that anybody's ever seen.
Yeah, that's right.
She's just this vision, and they are all just gobsmacked, especially the king is like, oh my goodness, this is it. This is the new queen.
I was talking to someone who actually did wrote a doctoral thesis on Esther and on actually three. It was on three: Ruth, Esther, and Judith. The story of Judith is a story from the apocryphal, sort of intertestamental Jewish literature. Interesting story. Recommend it. And the sort of thesis was that these characters. So think of Esther in this way is a kind of a type of Israel. So this character embodies, Israel is often, the covenant people are often, portrayed like a woman, the bride, the bride of, God's bride, as it were, and the covenant is seen like a marriage covenant, and so in a way, the characterization of Esther. Sort of fulfills that, the beauty and the glory of Israel in the midst of the nations, and how the covenant people becoming prominent, because of the glory of God in them. So I think there's something in that. I think Esther acts as a kind of type of Israel in this situation, this narrative. I think that's a fair way to read this. So, but of course, Mordecai is the other interesting. Is really in some ways, well, certainly just as prominent as Esther in this narrative. Now he hangs out at the king's gate. And he overhears two guards. And
I love this as a film. Like, cut to.
Has it been made into a film?
Who knows? It should be. In my mind, it is.
I think there's an old.
There probably is a few versions of it out there. But I love this cut to Mordecai hanging at the gate. And you're thinking, what's going on here? What is this? What has this got to do with anything? Yeah. And there's this crazy little scenario. Out in the streets. Yeah. Crazy little scenario. He's just walking around, minding his own business. And then overhears this conversation of two of the palace guards plotting to assassinate Xerxes. Yeah. Who up until this point, as far as we know, is this crazy drunk, powerful king,
well, the very powerful crazy drunk. So Mordecai tells Esther, and Esther tells the king and gives credit to Mordecai. Yes. And they investigate it. It's found to be true. Yep. And those guys are impaled on poles, as is the custom. And it's recorded, right? It's recorded. Everything is recorded here. So, and then then this goes by, and it's kind of forgotten about. Boom. And then next scene, right?
Yeah, next scene. Cut to our villain.
Yeah, cut to our villain.
Chapter 3, we get to meet Haman, who is just wonderfully evil.
Yeah. So Haman, the descendant of Agag, according to this narrative, is put in this very prominent place, probably the second most important person in the empire, and he elevates him to this place, and and all of the officials are paying, have to pay homage at him. So he comes through the king's gate, right? Whenever he comes through the palace, everyone kneels down, except Mordecai. Mordecai won't kneel down to Haman. Now, why doesn't he kneel down? It could be because there is, because there's more to the kneeling down than just paying honor. Yeah. And he feels that this is against Jewish scruples to do this to a mere man. That may well be the case. Maybe Haman claims something there. It could also be because he's an Amalekite. Yeah, that could also be the case. That this is somehow known.
But Haman straight away, his reasoning, we see inside the mind of Haman that he accounts it because he's a Jew.
That's right.
There's no beg your pardon, no questioning.
So there's something going on here. So we know that it's because he's a Jew. So I think it could be a combination of those things.
Totally,
so scruples about bowing down to him. We think of scenes in the book of Daniel about the refusal to bow down to, and so he just stews. I mean, he is he's looking for he doesn't want to just destroy Mordecai.
Yeah.
He wants to destroy them all.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a man with a grudge. Like, this is like, talk about a grudge.
Yeah.
So he's obviously intensely anti-Semitic, and this is just the straw that breaks the camel's back. Here is Mordecai. He won't bow down. This Jewish, but I'm going to get rid of this people. So
I'm not going to get rid of just Mordecai.
Yeah,
I'm going to get rid of them all.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a particular type of, evil, hatred in the heart that is just shocking.
So it says here in chapter 3, verse 7, in the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, the pur, that is the lot, was cast in the presence of Haman to select a day and a month. Yeah. And this is for the killing of these people. So he goes to, he gets permission from the king to kill all these people. They cast the lots, and it falls on this month, right? Yeah. And the lot is referred to as the pur. Now this is where we get the word Purim from this. Yeah. And it's interesting that the festival is named after the lot that's cast, right? Because there's this idea, and there's a proverb that says, men cast the lot, but the Lord determines the outcome. And, the outcome is interesting because the lot happens to fall on the month that's way, way, way. Like, this is a long time ahead, right? Pretty much as much within a year as they could possibly have to prepare for this.
Yeah, like 10, 11 months away. Yeah,
and now that becomes important because like if it was the next day...
They'd be in trouble.
Like, they would have been in trouble, right? But this gives the Jews time both for these events in Esther to take place and then for the Jews to prepare themselves to resist the onslaught that's going to happen as a result of this decree.
You're getting ahead of the story here. This is that moment. This is the moment in the film. This is that moment in the film where Haman, our evil character, has got the dice in his hand and he throws it, and the camera dramatically goes into it, and the bad guy says the name of the film. He's talking about the dice. It's the Purim, and then it goes. We know what it's all about.
Yeah. So the dice are Purim means lots, and I think the significance of that is that the Lord determine the outcome, but in a very strong way. Like there's an irony to this. Like, he's casting lots for the destruction of the Jews, but in fact he's just cast the lots for his own destruction. And this is this reflexive kind of thing that happens, and hence Purim. So he goes to the king, talks, slanders this people, say they've got different customs. I mentioned that before. They don't obey the king's laws, which wasn't true actually. This is slander.
Yes.
And it's in your best interest to get rid of this this people group. So the king gives him a signet ring. Go.
What's with this drunk guy? Why is he just letting this guy come in? I mean, we know that Haman's like his viceroy or something, like second in command, but my goodness, how about a little bit of investigation here, man?
Yeah, I don't think the king doesn't seem to be paying a lot of attention here.
He's having a lot of parties.
I think he's too busy having parties. And take my signet ring, which that's a pretty big deal. Yeah. And do whatever you want. Now, this seems like a bad outcome for the Jews, but the fact that the king's not paying attention is actually going to be, I guess, a chance for God to show that he is still faithful.
Well, in our reading this week, this is where we're up to.
Okay.
Right. So I reckon we're on the edge of the seats now in the film.
Yeah, good.
Right. This is the tension moment. Yeah. We're like, my goodness.
I'm not saying anything more. Yeah. They all die in the end.
This is we're leaving.
Sad. It's a tragedy. Like
we're leaving ourselves. If you've never gone through this before, this is on the edge of our seats here. What is going to happen to our heroes?
Keep reading the Book of Esther this week.
Yeah. So we'll continue on into next week. Anything you want to leave in the forefront of our minds as we go to look for as we read the rest of the book this week?
Well, we're looking for God's faithfulness to a people who are out there, who feel probably may have felt at this time, is God really interested in us? I mean, we're not really the hardcore people that have gone back to Jerusalem. I mean, you can imagine, there's this real hardcore spiritual people. They've gone back from Jerusalem. We're just here sitting around. God doesn't care about us. We're like the middle of the road crew, over here. They're still going to church. I mean, so to speak. Yeah. They're still doing all, but they're just thinking, is God still, is God really interested in us? Well, The book of Esther shows that God is faithful to you, even when you least doubt that you deserve it. You think, no, God's forgotten about me. He doesn't want anything to do with me. He's not interested in my life. Book of Esther shows that God is absolutely 100% committed to you. If you have entrusted your life to Jesus Christ, you are a part of this covenant community, and God's everlasting covenant of love applies to all of us. And it's like, this is the message of the book of Esther, is saying God is going to be faithful to you. Whether you feel deserving or not, he is going to be faithful because he is absolutely committed to you.
Oh boy, what a cliffhanger to leave Queen Esther and all the Jewish people in. What's going to happen? Well, don't read ahead. Don't want to spoil anything. I'm only joking, of course. We want you to read ahead and join us on next week's episode when we conclude the story from the book of Esther. Now, if you have questions about this book, if you've got questions about Esther and what you're reading, we are dying to hear from you. Head over to the website, thrivetoday.net.au. Listen to Benita, the voiceover lady. She'll give you some more ways to get a hold of us. And please jump on into our discussion and be part of the show. We would love to hear from you. Well, until next week, do us a favour and tell somebody about the podcast. But we'll talk to you then. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Thrive Deeper. We value all our listening community. If you are on Facebook, search and like Thrive Today page to get all of our latest updates. Our home on the internet is at thrivetoday.net.au. There you can subscribe to the Thrive Daily Reading Guide and contact us directly. That's at thrivetoday.net.au. Until next time, thrive.